week in June, and dare I say this is John Harbaugh's favorite week of the summer, not the weeks at the beach next month, which I'm sure everybody will be busting up beginning on Thursday night and moving all around the country. Meantime, Luke Jones is on the scene out at the back room and the back fields in Owings Mills and watching guys play. Some guys are there, some guys are not there. We're waiting on some other health issues. And Luke, I would say the biggest story is obviously the Brashad Perryman situation, right? And just the fact that 3 days ago you thought he was gone for good, and now, hold on, he might be on the field the opening week for all we know, right?
Yeah, and it's certainly good news. I don't want to throw a cold water on the situation, but I think it's a wait and see approach. I know the Ravens were very much optimistic. John Harbaugh was very much saying a lot of prayers were answered. And look, we know how much this kid's been through. We've talked about it since news broke over the weekend that he had suffered a partially torn ACL. The good news is in his visit with Dr. James Andrews, they deemed the knee to be stable. They deemed it to be functional, which, you have an injury like that. I mean, an ACL is all about stability. So we'll see how he progresses. I think the big thing to remember here is there was an injury because they gave him a stem cell injection. So some of the reports that have just said he didn't suffer a torn ACL, that's really just terminology. He didn't rupture his ACL, is what should be said. He did have a partial tear, and John Harbaugh even acknowledged that on Tuesday. So we have to see how he responds to the stem cell injection, how he responds to rest and rehab. I think the big key for him is going to be when he gets on the field, not just how is he running, but the big key will be how does he do changing direction. So, I don't want to say this isn't good news because the alternative is he has ACL reconstruction surgery and his season's over. So at the very least, he has a chance. And
some it's going to affect his speed, right? I mean, he can't put pressure down on it for a couple of weeks, right? And then it's about strengthening it, getting it back to full speed, getting it back to NFL speed. And by the way, there's that part where he has to go out and communicate with other people and catch footballs, right? So all of that's kind of washed away. All the practice part's gone.
Well, they're saying they expect him back at some point during training camp, and John Harbaugh even acknowledged we've kind of been down this road before. So, I'm still not willing to bet my mortgage on him playing in 2016, but you certainly couldn't have bet anything if he needed ACL reconstruction. I think a big part of this is timing. I think it's clear that something happened with the ACL. Now, is it a major tear, something that they say, he absolutely needs surgery? No. I think you remember they're 15 months away from next season if he would have had ACL reconstruction. So you have plenty of time in that regard. If there's some optimism that this is a very, very minor injury to the ACL that could heal on its own, could heal with some stem cells, which Dr. James Andrews is a big proponent of, as we've seen with a number of pitchers, as we've seen even with Brashad Perriman last year with the PCL in his other knee. But the big key is if you follow some of the sports injury experts on Twitter, guys like Will Carroll, they've all acknowledged that there's some kind of injury here, and there's a lot of debate, even when there's a partial tear to an ACL, whether it's going to heal on its own. So we'll see. Again, there's optimism, and he could end up being fine, but I would not be surprised if, at some point, whether it's 6 weeks from now, whenever it might be, when he gets back on the field. And keep in mind, they're 6 weeks out from training camp, so he has some time, more time, unlike last year when he got hurt on the first day of training camp, even though this is a different injury. But they've got some time to work with here, and you're going to have to wait and see, because I think the big key is not even how fast he is running straight line speed, it's how does he do changing direction, because that's, an ACL, you can still run, you can still function with your ACL damaged. The big key is you don't have any stability to change direction. So, the doctors said his knee's stable, and we'll see how he responds to treatment. But I do want everyone to pump the brakes, and I think most fans are doing that because I've gotten the comments so many times, been there, done that with him, even when the news broke Tuesday earlier in the day that the arthroscopic surgery had gone well. But I think he still has a ways to go until we really know just how realistic it is that he's going to, A, be able to play, and as you mentioned, B, how good and how effective will he be knowing that something did happen with his left knee.
Who's out there running around right now, wide receiver-wise? I mean, obviously, Kamar Aiken's doing his thing. Steve Smith, not so much. And I guess Mike Wallace also new to the part. It's just so weird when Flacco's not there, right? So, I don't know how much you get done in the passing game when you don't have your real quarterback.
Yeah, and it's funny. I was talking to a couple other local reporters how, just kind of asking, and I'm not saying this to be disrespectful to the Ravens right now or to Ryan Mallett, but how much can you really take away without having Flacco out on the field? Now, he was watching practice. In fact, it was funny. The patio where you typically see Ozzie Newsome and Eric DaCosta watching at least portions of practice, I saw Joe Flacco sitting there for a while, and then he joined his teammates, on the sideline watching. But, Kamar Aiken's been out there.
Reminds him of his redshirt year at Delaware, right?
Yeah, a little something like that. But, Kamar Aiken's been out there. Mike Wallace has been out there. I think, we talked about this when the Perriman injury went down. Chris Moore, the fourth-round pick out of Cincinnati, I think becomes a little more intriguing. But, we've talked about it a lot. This team has depth at the wide receiver position, even with Steve Smith being sidelined right now and not knowing exactly when he'll rejoin them on the practice field during training camp. But there's depth. I think everyone was excited that they had a little more high-end depth, and now with Smith being still sidelined, Perriman sidelined now, you don't have as much of that. But there are plenty of intriguing options as you go down the list. How it all fits together certainly remains to be seen. And as you mentioned, without Joe Flacco in the picture, it's difficult to gauge. And Ryan Mallett threw some nice balls on Tuesday, but I know during the final week of OTAs, that first OTA practice that was open, or the last OTA practice that was open to the media, didn't exactly have a good day throwing the football. So, there's a drop-off. There's no doubt about it, and that's understandable. But it is kind of weird looking at this team right now, especially on the offensive side of the ball, and even defensively with a couple guys that still aren't out there. But it's far from a finished product, and you look at it, and you're still kind of in wait mode to get Flacco back on the practice field.
Any thoughts about Anquan Bolden being a part of this? And I know that the rumors fly, and we talked about this for 2 full off seasons right after the Super Bowl. I think Derek Mason's available too, right? I mean, it's how far are you going to go with that when you're drafting kids that you want to have play, and how desperate are you to bring in 35 and 36-year-old wide receivers? We already have one of those. We're trying to get back on the field. I find it fascinating. These are the things we talk about in June, but I don't know that that's the direction Ozzie Newsome's looking.
I don't see what role he fills at this point. I mean, you have Kamar Aiken, you have Steve Smith, who is not a full-blown possession receiver, but more along those lines. Yeah, this team needs to get younger and faster, not bring in someone from the past who, look, you know me, the Ravens were wrong in getting rid of Anquan Bolden, period. And I don't care what anyone says, even 3 years later, it was the wrong decision. But that said, you can't go back. It's 3 years later now, and it's a case where he's near the end. Now, does he have more left in the tank than Derek Mason, as you just mentioned? Yeah, I'd say Anquan Bolden has something left, but didn't exactly have a great year with San Francisco last year. And, an even trade-off of Brashad Perriman out, Anquan Bolden in.
I'd take Torrey Smith back.
Well, yeah, no doubt about it. They're still trying to replace him. They still don't know if they have replaced him because even if Perriman's healthy, you still don't know if he can play. Mike Wallace, even though bad scheme fit in Minnesota and Miami to a lesser degree, but still true, but his career is not exactly trending in the right direction. So, yeah, if you're asking one of those two, I'd absolutely take Torrey Smith back in a heartbeat. But, as far as Anquan Bolden, I think that ship has sailed. I think, to this point, they have guys that kind of fill that role. As I've said now, going back to last year, I think Kamar Aiken is a poor man's version of Anquan Bolden, and Bolden at this point, I think, I hope he catches on somewhere. I think he can still help a football team, but the Ravens need to get faster and younger, not try to recapture part of their past.
Luke Jones joining us here. You can follow him, Luke, at WNST.net, as well as Baltimore Luke on Twitter. He will be out on the fields. I'm getting out there this week as well. And, of course, the Orioles trying to get things done up in Boston to get home, take on the Blue Jays this weekend. And Luke will be at Camden Yards this weekend following all things orange after another 48 hours of purple. All right, man, Eugene Monroe would be the next story of stories here. And I know John Harbaugh, had to talk about it at the breakfast in Florida a couple of months ago at the owners' meetings. Still getting questioned about it. Eugene has been blowing up my text last week and blowing up various media resources on cannabis oil and cannabis use and pain medication and, not playing football right now. And his name came up as trade fodder. I don't know how much I buy that given the cap number, but I would concede that there are teams out there looking for a left tackle, albeit one who's healthy enough to actually play 14 or 16 weeks, right?
Well, anyone who's surprised by this, and it's funny, I was debating with a couple Ravens fans on Twitter who were kind of saying it's silly that it's gotten to this point that the Ravens are getting rid of him because of his stance on medical marijuana. I don't see it that way at all. Now, is that a factor? Sure. Do NFL teams want players to fall in line and not be guys that are going to ruffle some feathers?
Yeah.
I mean, teams would rather not have guys like that, but Ed Reed was a guy who ruffled feathers. Ray Lewis was a guy who ruffled feathers at times.
But they played.
Yeah, you put up with guys who perform. This is way more about the fact that Eugene Monroe, who was given $17.5 million guaranteed over since signing his 5-year, $37.5 million contract 2 years ago, has started 17 games. Last year, he started and completed 3 games all season long. So the writing's been on the wall since the start of the offseason.
Well, and they used their number 1 pick. They could have picked anything they wanted at the 6th pick. They picked a left tackle.
They did that, but even before that, they were trying to re-sign Kelechi Osemele not to stay at left guard, but to move to left tackle. So they've been trying to replace this guy all offseason. It wasn't until, I think, March when he really started talking about medical marijuana. Now, did the Ravens have some inkling that he had that kind of a position before he went public with it? Possibly, but I think this is way more about not being able to depend on him, way more about the fact that he wasn't on the field when James Hurst got knocked into Joe Flacco's left knee, causing an ACL injury. And I think it's way more about the fact that, as you mentioned, they did draft Ronnie Stanley, and they're not going to pay a backup left tackle $6.5 million. So whether he ends up getting traded or not, and I'm very skeptical. I think any potential deal, a team's going to want to try to redo the final 3 years of Monroe's deal because he's set to make $6.5 million this year, $6.75 million next year, and also $6.75 million in 2018.
What could his value possibly be? A 6th-round draft pick? I mean, I don't know. What are you going to get for him?
Right. I mean, you're talking about a 6th-round pick, a conditional 7th-round pick, something along those lines. Which, by the way, if you can get that, God bless. I mean, because the dead money you're going to endure either way. I mean, the dead money will still count against the cap, whether he's traded or just released. And I do think if he's not successfully traded, then he's going to be released. I think he's practiced his last practice with the Ravens even, because it's pretty eye-opening that he wasn't on the field, even though last week he had said he was cleared via Twitter, and last Friday he had tweeted that the Ravens were distancing themselves from him and his position on medical marijuana. Again,
well, when you're signed and they tell you to stay away from mandatory camp, which obviously they're not fining him for not being there, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's clear they're holding him out. I mean, he said he was ready to go, and John Harbaugh didn't say he wasn't ready to go physically on Tuesday. He basically said Ozzie Newsome is fielding some offers, and we're going to see how that plays out. But for the Ravens to go public on that, it's pretty clear that they're prepared to walk away.
That's unique. I don't remember a mini camp where, the coach, any coach, Bill Marchibard, anybody, is talking about dealing a player instead of him being there, right?
Yeah. I mean, the only thing that came to mind that kind of reminded me of this reminds me of the Tennessee Titans with Steve McNair back in 2006. Remember
that they locked him
out of the facility, right? And then ultimately they traded him to the Ravens. So, but that's about the only thing that came to mind, at least something it's not recent. That was 10 years ago, my goodness. But it's apparent to me that Eugene Monroe is not going to be on this football team in 2016. And again, anyone who's not surprised, I question or anyone who is surprised, I question if you've been paying attention all off season, because every stop along the way, at best, the Ravens have sent a mixed message in terms of Monroe's status for 2016 and beyond. I mean, I could think back to even the Combine, again, a month before, or I guess not a month, but a few weeks before free agency had begun. And Ozzie Newsome said at that point, when I asked, or someone had asked him about Monroe, and he said, he's under contract. He's our left tackle right now because Kelechi Osemele is a free agent. And then the night that they drafted Ronnie Stanley, I asked him about Eugene Monroe, and he said, well, he hasn't been medically cleared, so he's kind of in the same boat as Flacco and Steve Smith and Suggs. Well, that's not an endorsement to be your left tackle moving forward. So I think it's been pretty clear, really since January or February, that the Ravens were trying to upgrade at left tackle, and they feel that they have with Ronnie Stanley, even if it's an upgrade merely from a standpoint of they feel they can depend on Stanley compared to Monroe, who's been so frequently injured over the last 2 years, and they just haven't gotten their bang for their buck. And it's looking like this is one of those duds. Maybe not the worst contract in franchise history, but it's certainly got to be up there. They've gotten 17 starts out of 17.5 guaranteed million.
All right, any other fallout news here happening this week? I guess Doomerville is a story to some degree, right?
Yeah, I mean, Doomerville's scheduled to talk with reporters on Wednesday, so he's there. But John Harbaugh said he had a, quote, preventative procedure. So he wouldn't delve into any more specifics than that. We'll see if Doomerville talks about that. But he did say he'll be ready to go for training camp, just not ready to go for mandatory minicamp. So is this a veteran that conveniently decides to undergo a procedure to stay out of mandatory minicamp? Who knows? But in the grand scheme of things, 3 days of minicamp probably isn't doing much to help or hurt Elvis Doomerville. So you'll kind of just let it go from that regard. But other than that, no real surprises as far as absences. Joe Flacco clearly not out there. Terrell Suggs, who is in the building. I've seen him in the building. He's rehabbing from the Achilles tendon issue.
I've seen him on HBO. He looks like he's in that show.
Yeah, right.
With
Ballers.
The Rock. Yep.
A show that over the top, but I enjoy it nonetheless. But beyond that, Bronson Kafusi, we knew he was going to be out until training camp with the back issue, but he did sign his rookie contract on Tuesday, so the whole draft class has been signed. They're under contract. And then, as we mentioned, Steve Smith, Brashad Perriman, and Michael Campanaro dealing with the calf issue that's keeping him out until training camp as well. But, no big surprises beyond the latest development with Eugene Monroe and, as we mentioned, Doomerville. And even Jimmy Smith was on the field, not doing a whole lot, just saw him playing catch, but did have his helmet, and they're expecting him to be ready to go training camp after having those screws removed from his surgically repaired foot from a couple years ago.
All right, they're sweating it out a couple more days out in Owings Mills. Luke Jones will be on the scene. You can always email Luke at WNST.net. You can also find him out on Twitter at Baltimore Luke. You can email me anytime, nasty at WNST.net. You can also find me on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram. Anywhere you are, we are, including the Baya Toyota Audio of all 24 hours a day. You can download that to your mobile and listen anytime, anywhere, to anything you want. We're also streaming live now on Facebook Live, as well as our YouTube stream, alive and well, in living color, including my Give a Spit shirt. I'll be sharing some Give a Spit memories all month long, as today would have been day 3 of the last year's Give a Spit tour. So we'll be putting some pictures up on my Facebook and Twitter as well. Appreciate all the support and the shout-outs coming our way from our live stream. Don't forget, our morning newspaper hits your email inbox at 7 a.m. each and every morning. It is powered up by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. Still $10 a month to get in shape over there for the bikini and the Ocean City season. And if there's any breaking news that happens first on the WNST tech service, that is good news and bad news, just like the Brashad Perriman or Vance Worley moving around with the Orioles. All that happens first right here on your mobile device. Sign up at WNST.net. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis will be here on Thursday, getting you home from 3 until 5. I'm Nestor. This is WNST.net AM 1570 and WNST Taos in Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.